Hello students, welcome to week 6 for COM 308. This week we are looking at power, influence, and conflict. You'll know in the week 5 lecture we highlighted a lot about power to kind of give us a preview for this week and to deal with some of the content that we were talking about last week. So this week we'll focus primarily on influence and conflict within interpersonal communication. We are we are in week 6. We are looking at chapters 10 and 11, and we are watching 3 videos related to the course content. We're completing ICA number 4 and discussion board number 6 with the original post due on Friday and replies due on Sunday. Discussion board number 6 asks you to write at least 400 words in looking at the situation listed below. So you're going to choose a person in a situation in which you have currently experienced or are currently experiencing. So you're either going through a conflict or you have a recent conflict, and go through 3 steps listed below. So justify in your post that what the conflict is. There's a specific difference between conflict and difference opinion or perspective as mentioned in the course text, so make sure you do identify that. Make sure it has the 5 stages of a conflict. That's expressed struggle, perceived incompatible goals, perceived scarce resources, interdependence, and interference from other parties. Describe the conflict and how it was handled utilizing communication styles, interpersonal behaviors and interactions, as well as conflict methods used within the text, and briefly define each method. So what you're going to be doing in a nutshell is discussing the conflict, how it was resolved, if it was resolved at all, and what it was like going through that according to points from within the course text. Your post should be at least 400 words. That is due on Friday, and your reply posts are due on Sunday, 2 of them with at least 150 word responses. We have ICA number 4 due. This is the same drill as we've been doing with the other ones. Different communication event you are analyzing. If you want to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, you can look at the conflict that you are talking about in the discussion board and then look at it as it pertains to an ICA. That's fine to use the same communication events. You're obviously analyzing each of them in different ways, so do keep that in mind if you decide to go that route. Otherwise, you can choose any communication event or mediated event that you feel that fits with the course content. As you're going through these ICAs, it is important that you highlight a different theory each time. It is very helpful in looking at and experiencing different theories and being able to analyze them at different levels. So that's my one bit of advice as it goes to looking at some of the content and getting into that from a little more of a deeper perspective. As we move on to some of the course points, it's important to look at and see that communication behaviors, what they are when we're facing conflict, pertain to a couple of different things. It's either destructive or constructive. So when we have a conflict with somebody, we are in a point of disagreement, it either can go one of 2 ways from an interpersonal perspective. The communication can be destructive, meaning that the response and communicative points are deceitful, fail to respect others, do not try to understand other points. That's usually impeding some type of solution, and usually is a result of emotions related to anger and things of that nature. Constructive is when you're looking for a win-win opportunity by expressing yourself honestly, listening effectively, using perception and validation, encouraging free exchanges of ideas. So conflict can either be destructive, meaning if we are quick to anger and we're utilizing some of those, we're speaking out of the flesh and how we feel, and we're angered by what that conflict may bring. We may be destructive in our communication. The ultimate goal is to navigate conflicts with a constructivist point of view. The chapter gets into some of the ideas by looking at conflicts in the idea of understanding that interpersonal conflicts really is a struggle between interdependent parties that occurs whenever one of the individual's thoughts or actions are perceived to limit or interfere with those individuals, with another individual. Conflict is really primarily based on interaction. It develops for a variety of reasons and assumes a variety of forms. Our feelings about conflicts would have no relevance without meaningful relationships. And we may look at conflicts as a positive when we realize that this means to grow and develop in our interpersonal interactions with each other. However, it's important to know that conflicts don't typically come from disagreement, but there are two types. It's either a functional conflict or a dysfunctional conflict. A functional conflict is one that develops for clear understanding of needs, attitudes, and beliefs, and this dysfunctional one is one that creates more of a serious problem within the relationship. So as we look at different ideas and such from the chapter, it's important to look at the desk scripts, which as a means of expressing feelings and understanding one another's feelings. So if you use this acronym, it's used a lot in therapeutic fashions and things of that nature, is that when you're trying to express your feelings and understand others, it's important to use the desk analogy to keep informed about it. So that's clearly describe, clearly express yourself, clearly specify the feelings and the understanding of others' feelings, and then understanding and acknowledging what the particular consequences can be, such as that. Another thing to look at this point would be to look at cognitive dissonance. This is a formal socio-psychological theory. It's rooted in the context of the communicator, so we're looking primarily at the communicator. It's pretty interdisciplinary. There are a number of different disciplines and fields that utilize this theory in a number of different ways. As communication professionals, we typically utilize cognitive dissonance in the area of knowing that there's a physical discomfort felt when two conflicting ideas emerge, and that can be knots in the stomach, feeling sick, feeling nauseated, feeling like you need to sit down, and we will constantly seek consonance, that's the reduction of dissonance, to return to an internal state of peace. This was developed by Festinger in the 50s, where he looked at the idea of buyer's remorse, where people will go and indulge and spend money on things that they might not have allocated for within their budget, and then they feel remorseful afterwards, and often to reduce that uncomfortable feeling of guilt from overspending, they'll return the items. That's an idea of experiencing dissonance, that guilt, and then returning the items takes away the guilt because you rectified the wrong, and now consonance is restored. This theory really focuses on attitude changes and the behavioral results of attitude changes. So this is a way to look at the dissolution of conflict. One person in a two-party conflict, one person will seek to reduce dissonance. That means get rid of that internal state of unrest and restore consonance, get the relationship back to a point of peace. And so keep that in mind and looking at some interpersonal interactions, especially with your ICA this week and your discussion number 6. When we look at expressive styles within conflict, there's a lot of different things we can look at. Particularly, the chapter talks about the idea of non-assertive, aggressive, and assertive styles in dealing with conflict resolution. An assertive point of view would consider and look at somebody that would being assertive and expressing themselves in a conflict. The bottom point would look at communicating honestly, clearly, and directly. Or if we look at somebody that's non-assertive, would be fearful or hesitant to express feelings, either for fear of self-worth or self-esteem, or often others will intimidate them and things of that nature. An aggressive style will express needs and wants openly, often ignore or violates rights of others. The goal is to win the argument or the conflict, and language is used to attack, stare down, or threaten others. Being assertive is usually the most ideal point, where you communicate honestly, clearly, and directly. You tend to be rewarding a behavior to help resolve conflicts and use good eye contact and language, meaning that I and we, rather than not referring to yourself in different ways. There are a number of different conflict management styles. Expressing styles are one of them, and then conflict management styles deal with avoiding, where a style of resolving conflict is that it's unassertive and uncooperative and trying to avoid what the actual conflict is. Some people tend to be competitive in nature, and so there's a competitive style that's used of resolving conflict that is high in assertiveness, low in cooperation. As a drive through competitiveness will strive the others to force their position on others. They aim to attain personal goals, things of that nature. Compromising style of conflict management is really in the middle range. It's a style of conflict management that looks to resolve conflict in both an assertive and cooperative manner. Accommodative is where we are unassertive and cooperative. It's a type of conflict resolution that looks at the idea that looks at the value of maintaining the relationship and the undervalue of attaining their own goals, and will seek harmony and peace regardless of what they really feel. They're very accommodating in what they may be dealing with. As we move through the assignments this week, keep some of these things in mind. The chapter also discusses conflict resolution and how it relates to culture. The United States is in an individualistic culture. That's where we prefer to deal with people directly. We typically use conflict management styles such as controlling or overt confrontational strategies in terms of dealing with conflict resolution. We typically are very assertive in our fundamentals of who we are and our makeup. Emphasis is given to individual rights. So when we look at conflicts, we look at what my individual right is and my effectiveness of that right in that particular setting, and we communicate openly and directly. If you look at a collectivist culture, which deals with cultures like Japanese and Korean, they deal indirectly with conflict. They don't necessarily confront it right on. Maybe they're they may be more passive with it. They prefer to use avoiding and smoothing strategies to help save face. They're very accommodating in their conflict resolution management style, rather than looking at how they personally feel, what they're personally effective with. They would rather diffuse the conflict altogether. They put emphasis on the group, where in the U.S. we put emphasis on ourselves as individuals. So they tend to look at how, if the conflict is resolved, will it affect the entire group that is affected by the conflict. And they prefer to avoid confrontation and preserve a sense of harmony. And this is given as a point, not as clarification, but just as a point to just kind of keep note of what cultural influences really, how they can affect conflict resolution strategies. And as we get through that, the chapter discusses a number of different ways that is applicable. Do keep in mind we are working on the week 6 agenda this week, so we're reading chapter 10 and 11. We're watching some videos related to conflicts and conflicts of interest and power and things of that nature. We're completing ICA number 4 as well as discussion board number 6. We should be working on our critical assignment that's due in a couple weeks. You don't want to wait to the last minute to watch that video and start your analysis. If you have any questions, let me know. I look forward to interacting with you this week, and I pray you all have a blessed week.